Evening. Welcome to House Groups. We are at the end of the first half of Ephesians this week. Ephesians, as a letter, really can easily be broken up into two parts. So the first three chapters are very theological, and they talk a lot about God's remarkable redemption of us and the gospel. And the last three chapters of Ephesians, Paul really gives a lot of practical advice on how to live because of the gospel. And in our last two verses of chapter 3 today, Paul writes that God is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. And really the end of this chapter shows how amazing our God is. I mean, we learned last week that God's love is so amazing that it's beyond what we can know. And today we learn that God's power is so amazing that it's beyond what we can think. And the surprising thing is that God's power, Paul says, is at work within us. Within us. That amazing power can be unleashed through you. This week I read a story about a woman who felt like God was calling her to do something to help the increasing number of particularly women around her that were struggling with mental health. But she had no idea how she could even make a difference. All she could see really were her own limitations. In fact, she even began to sit down and list some of them out to God. And she wrote down things like shyness, a fear of getting involved, lack of time, a cold heart, feelings of inadequacy, fear of failure. And as she finished her list, she saw that it was time to go pick her kids up from school. And so she put on her coat and she reached for her gloves, and she noticed that her gloves were lying kind of limp and useless, like gloves, right? Until she slipped her hands inside of them. And at that moment, she had one of these really cool revelations that we get from God every once in a while. And she realized that God didn't want her to think about her limitations. Rather, he wanted to put his power into her and work through her, just as her limp gloves became useful when she put her hands into them. God had put his power into her, and he was going to use her for great things. Now, I think the question for all of us is, what is God calling you to do? And have you been saying no because you've been looking at your own strength and not his? I want you to talk through this tonight, and I pray that you, as Hebrews says, spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Amen.